Portrait of a Hero, John Innes of Newburgh by James McBey. Visually described by Karen Jameson. Portrait of a Hero, John Innes of Newburgh, is part of our permanent collection here at Aberdeen Art Gallery. It is on display in Gallery 13, James McBey, Artist Adventurer. It was painted in 1936 by James McBey and donated to Aberdeen Art Gallery collection in 1960 by his partner Marguerite. Marguerite had amassed a substantial archive of books, letters and diaries charting her life with James McBey. After his death in 1959, she donated this archive, along with numerous examples of his work, to Aberdeen Art Gallery and museums, making the city's collection the best in the world. The painting is in portrait format, meaning it is higher than it is wide. It is about 81 centimetres high and 61 centimetres wide. This is a portrait painting of a man called John Innes, who lived near Newburgh in northeast Scotland, but there is nothing in the painting that obviously shows him to be a hero. The sitter John Innes appears to be an ordinary man with ordinary surroundings, but it is how James McBey has depicted him through pose and expression that makes this portrait so appealing. So let's explore pose, expression and colour. John Innes is seated in the centre of the composition from below his waist upwards. The type of chair he is sitting on is not visible, but he is sitting upright, and the composition gives the impression that he is sitting close to us, the viewer. He is of average size, but his body almost fills the composition and is flush with the right-hand side of the frame, with a little more space left between his body and the left-hand side of the frame. He is sitting almost straight on, but slightly turned to our left, with his arms folded lightly across his chest. His gaze is slightly downwards and off to our left-hand side, and his body language is relaxed and comfortable. The background is an interior room, perhaps a studio or sitting room. It takes up around a third of the composition, from above his shoulder on the right-hand side of the frame, a few inches above his head, over to the other shoulder and down to the bottom left-hand side of the frame. The background is not detailed, but instead made of different rectangular shapes of muted colours and tones. John Innes is possibly in his early to mid-60s, and his appearance is casual but smart. He's wearing a light brown flat cap, beneath which there is a hint of silver grey at his temples. His skin tone is tanned brown, which offsets the sky blue eyes beneath neat dark eyebrows. The bridge of his nose is straight, and his cheeks have a slightly ruddy complexion of someone who spends most of their time outdoors. He is smoothly shaven, apart from a neatly trimmed dark brown moustache that fills the space between his nose and upper lip and stretches to each corner of his mouth. He has a wine red neckerchief around his neck, which is neatly knotted, and the tails are tucked into his dark blue fisherman's jumper, which is in excellent condition and no sign of wear. The neat cuffs end at his strong but not muscular forearms, which are equally as tanned as his face. His hands are tucked into the crook of his arms, and he sits in a comfortable, almost meditative pose, with his arms folded across his body at the midriff, and the hint of dark grey trouser is shown just above the bottom of the frame. His facial expression is as relaxed as his body. His eyelids are half closed over the bright blue irises as he gazes off into the distance. His facial muscles are smooth and his lips are softly closed, giving him a quiet, almost contemplative expression. The tones throughout this artwork are soft and natural, with hints of brighter colours shining through. The entire background from left to right is of interior wall, and on the right-hand side there are abstract rectangular shapes that could be paintings. The wall directly behind John Innes covers half the background and is a mixture of duck-egg blue and light sand brown. The brushwork shows the blue wash over the brown as if the blue paint is fading, showing the stone wall beneath. At the bottom of the wall there is a mustard yellow skirting, and below that, leading to the bottom of the frame, a dark earth-brown wooden floor. On the right of the wall there is half of a white frame with a rectangular shape and a brighter, hotter shade of yellow in the centre. Above that yellow rectangle there is a small section of what could be a painting, showing an abstracted scene made of vertical brushstrokes in blue, green and brown. The whole background palette is lighter and more muted compared to the colours and tones used to paint John Innes himself. In the background, large, flat, downward brushstrokes mix the paint into slightly rough patches, showing layers of darker tones beneath. As the background has little to no detail, it simply provides a backdrop for the man sitting before us, emphasising his importance. McBey has used smaller and more meticulous brushstrokes for the detail in John Innes's face and clothes. Skin tones are carefully blended strokes of brown, pink and red, while feathered brushstrokes of blue hues create the texture of his wooden jumper and heavy navy lines pick out the folds in his clothing and cap. Let us now consider the style and the theme of this portrait. This is a good example of a portrait which was more modern than his many other traditional portraits of the 1930s. It is realistic in proportion, facial details and expression, but the influence of McBey's background as a self-taught printmaker are evident. Although colours and tones are varied, there is a flattened style in the blocked colours of John Innes's clothing and textured layering in the background that strives for atmosphere rather than present a realist vision of the scene. The texture of the oil paint will be relatively smooth to the touch, with thin and blended layers. The style has a distinct coastal feel, with the tanned sitter wearing a fisherman's jumper, cap and neckerchief, and the weathered interior behind him. McBey has painted John Innes in a respectful and considered manner, depicting him as a humble person that you would not suspect to be a hero, yet there is an air of calm assurance in his pose and expression. So what makes John Innes a hero? John Innes was a quietly spoken man and an elder of the Church of Scotland, at the artist James McBey's hometown of Foveran, near Newburgh in Aberdeenshire. He was also a coxswain of the Newburgh lifeboat from 1908 to 1931, and his son James was a bowman from 1919 to 1951. Both men became heroes on the night of 15th of October 1923, when the Imperial Prince ran aground on a shoal off of the Aberdeenshire coast. The Newburgh lifeboat twice attempted to rescue the crew, but after the second attempt had to return exhausted. A crew of blue jackets from a cruiser in Aberdeen Harbour volunteered to take the lifeboat out again, and Innes went as a coxswain for the third time. The attempt was largely successful as they rescued 7 of the 9 crewmen. The Royal National Lifeboat Institute awarded him a silver medal, and his son received a bronze, which is still in the family today. I'd now like to give you some background information on James McBey, the artist and adventurer. James McBey was born in Foveran, near Newburgh in Aberdeenshire, in 1883. He had a poor and difficult upbringing, which culminated in tragedy when his mother took her own life when he was in his early 20s. He clerked in a local bank throughout his teens, and he would escape to Aberdeen City Library to read art books, and he taught himself etching from an art book he had borrowed there. In 1910 he travelled through North Africa, America and Europe, where he was inspired by the etchings by artists such as Rembrandt. He was appointed as a second lieutenant in the Army Printing and Stationery Service in 1916. This led to him being appointed the official war artist to the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, accompanying the Allied advance through Palestine. It was in this period that he etched and painted some of the most iconic scenes and people of the Arab Campaign, or Arab Revolt, such as the Allies entering Jerusalem, and a portrait of the British military leader T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia. This cemented his international reputation, and his etchings were sold for high prices at auction during the post-war print boom. In 1931, McBey married a photographer from Philadelphia called Marguerite Loeb. The couple bought properties in Tangiers and Marrakesh in Morocco. He became an American citizen in 1942, and although he made regular trips to Britain and America, he spent most of the remainder of his life in Morocco and died in Tangiers in 1959, aged 76. So what is special about this portrait of John Innes by James McBey? I think it is one of the most splendid examples of portraiture in the Aberdeen Art Gallery collection. McBey travelled the world, witnessed war firsthand, socialised with people of state and with people of all backgrounds he met during his extensive travels. Yet he chose to paint a local man from his hometown who he considered to be a hero. McBey painted John Innes not with medals or symbols of glory, but in his natural surroundings as an ordinary man. For me, McBey's portrait painting of John Innes is a reminder that we can all be everyday heroes. This brings me to the end of the visual description of the painting Portrait of a Hero, John Innes of Newburgh, which is part of the permanent collection in Aberdeen Art Gallery.